finishing off with cold water. So I think there was a benefit for my hair. It might affect your eyebrows.
I really wish I could say the same. Yeah, I'm so jealous. You wouldn't understand how jealous I am, but
I know the feeling.
Michelle, hiya. Yeah, we're in the same boat, aren't we, unfortunately?
Yeah, you're just rubbing it in, Ruth, aren't you?
As I said, I didn't like to say it, but I thought, no, Alberto can take it. If he can put cold showers, he can.
Outside.
Definitely.
Yes, the eyebrows, definitely the eyebrows.
Yeah.
So guys, we're live on YouTube, and today we're doing things very differently. We're discussing self-awareness, and we're really discussing it. You know, we're getting down to what it is, how we experience it, how we develop it. There's no presentation. We'll just, you know, we're going to share our ideas. We're going to discuss, you know, how to determine how self-aware we are. If we have little personal tests that work for us, let's look at that. Let's explore that, and and let's look at how we can develop it. You know, there's loads of research into self-awareness from a very sort of mundane, practical point of view. And it shows that people who are more self-aware feel more successful, do better in careers, or achieve more, you know, in terms of their career goals, etc. So self-awareness has multiple benefits. And, you know, when we talk higher development of any kind, spirituality, mysticism, even just exploring the world around us, self-awareness comes up as one of those basic personal skills that we have to develop. So, you know, what is self-awareness?
I was going to ask you.
Well, so, you know, I can give you the definition, but I think we all already know what self-awareness is, because we're all, to a certain degree, we're all self-aware. So, Seema, go ahead. You're mute. We can't hear you.
No, I was just waving to say hello, and I wanted to ask you the same question actually, because I have vague idea, but I want the technical answer.
Okay, so the technical answer is that self-awareness is how you consciously know and understand your own character, feelings, motives, and desires, right? And self-awareness is basically divided into two broad categories: internal self-awareness and external self-awareness. But it's basically, it's conscious. It's a conscious knowing or understanding of our own character, feelings, motives, desires. So basically an understanding of all the things that drive us, all the things that make us do what we do. You know, because we can do things without being aware of why we're doing them. And all self-awareness is saying, it's actually, you need to understand why. What's your reason for doing it? Where does it come from?
Well, I'll volunteer that I think I'm a very late developer in terms of self-awareness. I feel that it's been quite late in the day before I've stopped to actually start thinking of these questions of what am I like? Why did I do what I do? So it's good. It's better late than never.
Definitely. It's one of those things that's, I think it's interesting, no matter when we start looking at it. And sometimes it's a slight advantage to starting later on, because then you can really tell the difference between when you were self-aware and when you weren't paying attention. You know, you can actually see the difference. So I think, you know, you're probably, and you know, if you've had that sort of experience, then you're in a better position to describe what self-awareness really is.
Just being alive is being self-aware, isn't it? Basically, but I think myself and most people, you don't think about it. You know you're aware and you know what's going on, but like Ruth, I've never really analysed myself in any way, I don't think. But I'm still self-aware, so I still know what's going on.
Yeah. So, you know, what was very interesting, I remember reading an article a few years ago about the difference between consciousness, being conscious, and being self-aware.
Mhm.
So consciousness implies that awareness, that because we're all living entities, we're all sentient beings, we're all aware of being alive.
Mhm.
But the difference is self-awareness comes when you're, and this is the strange one, right? I'm saying consciousness is when you're aware. Self-awareness is when you're conscious that you're aware. It's actually, you know, it's actually when you know what you're aware of. Does that make sense, Alberto?
Yeah, I think I described consciousness, didn't I, really, by saying I'm alive.
Consciousness.
Yeah.
And you know, they're both incredibly important aspects and so closely interrelated. And I think as human beings, we very often confuse the two.
Mhm.
Is it a case of being self-critical then being self-aware?
No, see, that's just it. Self-awareness is not about being self-critical. It's also not about being self-conscious.
It's just, is it about accepting who you are? And I'm a bit like Ruth. I would say that I'm quite a late developer in this area. Just a bit more aware of who I am as a person, what makes me tick, what's good for me, what's not good for me. It doesn't mean that I do those things, just that mean what's, and I just don't mean silly little things like diet. I mean, you know, more meaningful things like the people around me, how I behave, how other people behave towards me, and relationships and all of that. That bit is more important to me now.
Yeah, no, definitely. You know, it you know, when you think about self-awareness, it can be the very simple decisions that we make, like why today I'm craving carrots instead of peas. You know, what does my body need vitamin A? And then it's the bigger things as to why do I want to make this career change? Why do I feel unsatisfied in you know, and things change, you know, in life. I was so happy with that particular situation, and right now it's not really doing it for me. You know, what has changed within me? That's self-awareness as well. You know, I mean, I suppose the way I like to think about it is self-awareness is not why I do something, but understanding why I'm doing it. It's the understanding. I can see you thinking.
Yeah.
I'm much more aware of what motivates me now, as opposed to when I was younger, when I really didn't care. So I feel maybe because I've matured a bit or something, but I'm more aware of my motivations as to why I do certain things and why certain things upset me, why certain things make me happy. Is that the kind of thing you mean, self-awareness?
Definitely. What makes me do the things I'm doing, what upsets me, you know, what makes me angry? Because sometimes we get angry, and if we don't know what we're angry at, we're very likely act or react in the wrong way with the wrong person if we don't understand where that anger is coming from or why we're angry. So yes, absolutely, Swarupa. But you brought up a very important point, and I think Ruth's alluded somewhat to that point, is do we all become more self-conscious, self-aware as we grow older?
I'd say yes, because you think a little bit more deeply about things when you're older. You give time to matters more. When you're younger, you're more carefree.
And you've experienced more, and you've had more relationships, and you've had more things happen to you, and you've done more things, and you've lived a little bit longer. So that I would have thought that's only natural.
Mm-hmm. So, and I don't know, do we think that when people develop self-awareness when they're younger, is that an advantage or a disadvantage?
I'd say advantage myself.
Yeah.
I don't know, it might restrict you and stop you from being a bit carefree in your teenage years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's an important point, Seema. Does self-awareness mean that you can't be carefree?
Yeah, exactly. I was just about to say, it depends how you're defining and what it stops you from doing. You know, if it stops you from doing the things you want to do, you can still do silly things and be aware of it.
But then if something stops you from doing the things you want to be doing, is that self-conscious or self-aware?
God, I don't know.
That's
I
a
don't-
really good question.
I would have thought it was, you're consciously aware that something may be wrong or right, and then you'll stop it. So you're conscious, I would have said.
Yeah. So self-awareness is where you're conscious of
Yeah.
why you want to do something.
Yeah.
Also why you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're self-aware, then you're better able to weigh the two and decide, well, actually, I shouldn't be doing it. But you know what? I really want to. And you make a more responsible decision. Whereas if you're self-conscious, I really, really want to do that, but it may make me look silly, it may be stupid, it may be whatever, so I'm not going to do it. So you see, where this thing, the definition talks about self-awareness can be inner awareness or outer awareness. Where is it coming from? Is it coming from what other people think about you? Because so often I think we confuse self-awareness with other awareness. The self is sitting out there looking in on the body as opposed to from inside out and saying, this is how I view the world. We're more.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, it's expectations and rules and regulations and demands that the world puts on you.
Yeah.
That obviously forms your personality and what you think is right or wrong, irrespective of your inner awareness or consciousness.
But do you think then a self-aware person would be less likely to fall into those stereotypes?
Yeah, I would have thought so. Because I think you'd have to be quite a strong individual not to follow that. I mean, I think we covered this, didn't we?
We did.
What if like the 10 people around you are going in that direction and you know that's not the right direction. It's whether you're strong enough to say, actually, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go this way. So, yeah, I would have thought that you need some inner strength along the way.
Definitely. Sorry, Ruth, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to give a couple of examples of in my life when I kind of had this realization about myself. And there was more in my professional life, and it was quite late. And, when you come out of a meeting and you just feel uncomfortable and bad, and instead of just carrying on at a certain point, I had to stop and say, what's happened? Why was that? Why don't I feel good now? And two things that I discovered about myself, which were not very comfortable. And one was that I would sometimes behave in ways to avoid confrontation. So that in an encounter, professional encounter, I would agree to things or not disagree with things that I shouldn't have, if you see what I mean, because I didn't want to confront a disagreement. So I would go along with things and then feel bad about it after. And it took me a while before the feeling bad about it after got to the point where I had to stop and think, why do I feel like horrible here in my chest after that meeting? And I had to go back and think, because you have such a strong feeling in the meeting of avoiding conflict that you are just agreeing to do things or whatever, you're not being true to yourself in the moment. And I had to, and that was quite hard to unlearn, but it was important. I'm not saying I've achieved it, but it was an important realization. So that was one. Another one, which is not very nice to admit to, but another, like sometimes I would perhaps say things for effect, which is slightly different, a kind of showy offy thing. And I'd come out of a meeting and feel like, or an encounter and feel I don't feel very comfortable. And I'd realized I'd put myself out on a ledge unnecessarily, showing off. And so I had to say, why do you don't have to do this? Why are you doing this to yourself? So they weren't very comfortable things to acknowledge in myself.
Yeah.
But they were quite late. But yeah, so I'd say that would be a couple of examples of my kind of late arrival at some sense of self-awareness, of understanding behaviors, and at a certain stage in my life actually thinking, I don't feel good. Why don't I feel good? And it's because I was behaving in ways that had a short-term benefit, but actually a longer-term hit back.
And obviously didn't sit right with something inside, something.
But it took me years before I realized that. So that's why I say, I mean, I've been doing that all my life, I think, until there came a point when I think a lot of, I don't know if it's just a women's thing, but I think a lot of women in their 40s and 50s in a professional situation find life very hard.
Yes.
Things that have gone easily, suddenly, you lose confidence, you know, all sorts of things happen, and you have to stop and think what's going on. So I think it was part of that process. One of the things that I realized during that time.
That's quite interesting, because you find, and I'm sure this happens with men as well, but you find many women who would say that, I sort of accepted a lot in Korea. I played the game. And then you get to your 40s and 50s, and the time gets used, and then I started to really believe in myself and stand up for myself, and things became really, really uncomfortable. So we see that happen very, very often, where, when we feel this need to be, or when we have this ability to be true to ourselves, then things become a little more challenging.
Yeah.
Would you say, Ruth, that your personality is non-confrontational anyway? Is that why you didn't want to sort of confront people at work?
That's a really good question. And I'm not sure I've got the self-awareness to answer it, because part of me would say, oh, of course, that's what it means. But another part of me would say, no, I sort of am sometimes. I think the answer is probably not very noble. I'm a bit of a coward or something, there's a bundle of things in there which are not necessarily comfortable, but on the other hand, not acknowledging them really is more damaging than actually trying to work out, who am I? So yeah, it's still a journey.
Definitely. But that's an important point, because very often self-awareness means acknowledging the things that we'd rather keep hidden, these things that maybe we don't like about ourselves. So I've been through a similar process. I thought, oh well, I've reviewed and tried to pay attention to why I do things, and then I noticed something about myself. That I have a temper. And Vishal's going to smile about this. But, I noticed that I have a temper, and I've always been the calm person. I've always been in roles where I felt it was my role to exert the calming influence. And I realized, well, actually, there is this temper, and if I actually, when I admitted to myself that there was this temper, and there was this, this bit that did get angry, and I found that when I addressed that and allowed that to show, then the peaceful situations that in the past I struggled to resolved themselves. Righteous, and then I came to this term with myself, that righteous anger can be positive. So I've got to watch for the unrighteous anger, when the anger is misdirected. When there's no reason to be angry at a particular person and rather to be upset with myself for making a mistake, then that has to be directed towards myself. But when there's a need to address the anger, annoyance, whatever it is with the other person, provided it's done in a way that's constructive and appropriate in the appropriate time, it can actually effect huge positive change. And so I think, for me, that was an important one, because I hadn't acknowledged consciously that I thought, that anger was not noble, but somehow in my subconscious that got buried in. It's not noble to be angry. Yet, acknowledging any of these emotions, if it's true, can be incredibly powerful, not just for ourselves, but the people we interact with.
That's just really just an important life lesson, that you need to fight for the things that are just and right and that make you angry. But like you say, you need to maybe let go of the things which aren't right, but in your head you might be thinking for some strange reason they're right. I think that's a life lesson that you deal with, don't you, over the years, and hopefully it becomes clearer when you're right and when you're wrong, and when to let go and when to sort of dig your teeth in.
Exactly, Alberto. It's a life lesson. And I think, we talk about self-awareness and it's like, oh, I've reached the age of 36 and I became self-aware. I don't think that is possible. I think that for as long as we're alive, self-awareness is a balancing act. Do I understand where I'm coming from in this moment? And it's a moment to moment thing. And I don't think it ever ends.
I really like the phrase righteous anger. I'm going to use that occasionally. I'm righteously angry at certain things.
Yeah.
Because
but the important thing is you have to run your little self-awareness test and ensure that you are genuinely righteously angry, because sometimes it's like, actually, I've gone through this process. Actually, that anger is the only time that anger will be righteous is if it was directed at myself, because I'm the one that's misinformed here, because that's the important thing as well. And even then it's powerful because it affects a change within myself.
Yeah, because my issue is, and I've tried to improve it, is that I would get angry and deep down I would know that actually was my fault and like trying to blame other people for certain situations, knowing actually I was part of the reason why whatever happened. So that's Ruth, there's a lot to learn, isn't there?
There's a lot to learn, and the learning doesn't stop, it doesn't end.
Yeah, but unlike Ruth, at work I've been quite the opposite. I wouldn't stand for any nonsense, and that that gives you a reputation for something else, that you get things done, and you're fair, but you don't stand for nonsense, and you walk away from silliness at meetings and call people out. You have to do that. You have to do that, as Alberta says. Otherwise, we wouldn't move forward.
Self-awareness does not mean you have to be a pushover.
Yeah.
It means that whatever you're doing, you understand your reasons for doing it, you've considered it, and you choose the best course of action.
Can I just add in something there, because I think that's very relevant what Seema spoke about, and Alberta and Ruth, because the fact that you're actually on this this talk that's already shows that self-awareness, because you may think that, well, you the odd one out, or oh, well, why me, I am there's an element of difference, but it is that element of self-awareness, because I can assure you people do struggle with this eventually. They do get there, as Ruth called it, part of their journey. They find one thing, actually, there's a really nice, I think it's a series or a book about things that people did not regret. They interviewed a whole lot of people in a nursing home, and one of those, I just took a leaf from that you just have to be authentic, and you have to be the person that you are and know why you're doing it. And for me, I think I'm surprised nobody brought up the word mindfulness, which was really in 1999 that Jon Kabat-Zinn spoke about this mindfulness component, and it's been zooped up by the medical community and perhaps overused. But it's actually simplicity. I think Natasha said, what is it? Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And it's actually saying, oh, stop. Yeah, maybe I am wrong. And actually just being silent and being contemplative and saying, we always, I would do this, do that. And actually just human being, just be. It's like, oh, okay. And you're not necessarily even acknowledging the guilt, not admitting to the guilt, not accumulating guilt, just being, saying, oh, okay. And that I would regard as, how I often explain reflection on at the moment, instantaneous reflection. You're just quiet. And you may have noticed some people, something's going on and suddenly they're just quiet. And then you're sort of looking around for them, and then they re-engage with the situation. And that's how I personally have come to that self-awareness. And the added component for me was just the gratitude and gratefulness, and getting the humility under control, that, oh, okay, wow, I'm so fortunate to be in this. And that may not be positive, or maybe a positive situation or a negative situation, because even negative situations grows you, sends you on a journey of a different path that could be ultimately beneficial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's an important one, Vishal, authenticity. Mm. So self-awareness is very tied in with authenticity. When we talk about, being your true self, being authentic. And very often you get people saying, well, I don't know what my true self is. Well, that's what self-awareness is. It's about making it a priority to understand who you are. The question, who am I? What do I stand for? What's important to me?
Can I mention that point, Tash, is that's why I slightly have a bugbear about all these self-help books out at the moment, because then people sort of dive onto a bandwagon and say, that's what I am. And instead of saying, okay, you don't have to be influenced by the media or the books just stop and reflect on yourself, and why the yoga and the meditation comes in. Well, now hang on, it's self-awareness. It's not buying a new book or the new #1 bestseller in the New York Times. It's, I'm such and such. And it's like, no, maybe not. Maybe you're just a combination, a little bit of everything.
Self-awareness is looking at what other people are saying, but not undervaluing what's going on inside. Not giving in to the outer or the external pressure or bestseller, whatever that may be. And it's not, and self-awareness is also not about not doing it, not just resisting everything. That's not self-awareness. It's about taking the things that matter to you, and also thinking, well, that could be the bestseller. He or she may be the latest guru of the world, but if it doesn't hold true for me, then it doesn't hold true for me, and I have to follow what's true for me. I think that's the important thing. You were saying,
could you be mistaken? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Swaroop, and then we'll have Alberto, because he was waiting to add something.
That's fine. Could you be mistakenly self-aware? What I'm saying is, could you never be completely self-aware, as in you attribute wrong motives to the reason you behave a certain way, or you just do not understand yourself, however hard you try. And so therefore you come across confusing to other people, because you're thinking, because you might think you're doing certain thing because of something, because of a reason, but you're actually doing it because of something completely different, but you don't understand yourself.
You know, that is something that is very often seen in human beings, in all of us. You know, attribution theory. We attribute negative things to other people and positive things to ourselves. We all have this attribution bias. We all would do it. But I think this is where, you know, it's actually noticing the patterns. And in that case, yes, Swarupa, it's very, very possible to misappropriate your behavior, you know, attribute behavior to processes. But this is where, you know, actually thinking about it, going through what your motives are, and really spending time, because it's also, I mean, I think the reason it's so confusing is because we don't spend enough time doing it. But I think if we start, and this is where, you know, and everybody has their own tricks and their own ways of doing it. And I think, you know, it's about speaking to people. We all have these little questions we ask ourselves to see what's real, what's not, what's true for us, what's not. And I think, you know, the whole idea of finding those questions that actually help you overcome that bias. But we're as human beings, we're all, you know, subject to that bias. We do it. If we don't slow down our actions, if we're not cognizant of why we're doing things, we all can fall into that trap.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that answer, or are you saying, you know, some people, always a question that some people may never experience it, or may never have that awareness?
Yeah, I do feel sometimes people might never get there. Honestly, there are certain people who probably think that the reason they're doing so, they attribute. How do I explain this? They attribute better qualities to themselves maybe than they actually have, and possibly it could be the other way around. People who aren't maybe very self-confident, who attribute maybe negative reasons to the reason they do things, and don't give themselves enough credit, maybe.
Definitely we see it both ways. You see people who, you know, who we look at them and think you're pretty amazing, you know, what you're doing is so fantastic, and they really, you know, don't acknowledge it within themselves. Yeah, and so that's just it, you know, that's, yeah, what can we do for those people as a society? I think that's an important question. And then the other bit, you know, where you get the person who is, well, always right, always knows best. You know, and this is the reason, following our self-awareness, in 2 weeks, we're talking about the ego. Because we all have egos, right? We all have a way that we see ourselves. We all have a preferred way that we want to present ourselves to the world. And that, you know, that's what gives rise to the ego. And once we start actually thinking about self-awareness, we actually stand a chance of understanding our own egos and the positive and negative traits of our egos, because they all exist. You know, there's no black and white in the world, and there's no black and white because situations change. You know, something like being, you know, the strong-minded leader who needs to get a team out of danger, and you take on that role because you know you have the capability, may not work in a family environment. And that's just it. So, you know, yes, so if you hold too much, if you hold too closely to that I'm the leader ego, then it may have negative impacts in other areas of your life. So it's about, that's where the self-awareness as well comes in. Actually, in this situation, am I operating with awareness and compassion?
I think the ego overtakes the self-awareness, doesn't it, in a lot of people? And, you know, if you mention famous people, Donald Trump, I mean, how much ego has he got? And, you know, what do people think of him? And he'd never admit he was wrong in anything. and he'd tell you blatantly black is white and white is black until he was blue in the face. But, you know, and that's ego, isn't it? You take Barack Obama, another president, the complete opposite.
Yeah. Compassion.
Yeah. Compassion, no ego. You know.
Go ahead, Ruth.
No, I was just thinking what Alberto made me question, which is, you know, is there a kind of tension between ego and self-awareness? I mean, does your ego, I think what you were saying, Alberto, does your ego stop you? And it follows on from what Swarupa was saying, you know, is there a block between people's ego and self-awareness? And at a certain point, some people's ego, our own ego, stops us from seeing things about ourselves that make the ego feel less good about itself.
Yeah, I think it takes over myself. That's what I think, the ego takes over, good or bad.
But you know, it's what you were saying, Ruth, and I think we all have situations where we can identify with that, where we say something, you know, you're talking about something, and then the ego takes over, and you go on saying it, and then you think at the end of it, oh, that's a bit show-offy, you know. We all have had those situations because it didn't need to be said. And, you know, we've all had those glimpses where the ego has just, and you think, but I think, you know, the realization, ooh, that's a bit show-offy. And then, you know, reminding yourself to be watchful, that's where the self-awareness can actually help modulate that ego. And then we've had the opposite. We've also all had the opposite, where we sat in a room, we've known the answer, and then we've thought, oh, I don't want to be the show-off. I don't want to be the know-it-all. And we've held back. And then you see a really poor outcome, and you think, why didn't I just say it? I could have prevented this from happening. We've all had that. And then too, you think, well, that's it. You know, that was the ego, the nice me, the me that wanted to be all quiet and agreeable. You know, we all have that.
What's the answer to that, Natasha? Because, you know,
the answer I think comes from the self-awareness. What is the right? And so I think, you know, for me, the important thing is that, okay, what is it that's preventing me from saying what I think is the right answer right now? Is it the ego who wants to be the nice person, like the person who doesn't get angry? Or is it the ego that wants to show off? And if either one of those egos are there, then it's better to be quiet. But if I think about it and those egos aren't there, or if I think, okay, the ego that wants me to be quiet here is that ego that wants to be all nice. But this, I really honestly believe this is the right answer, then I'm going to say it actually. I don't agree with you. If you can give me an alternative solution, then please go ahead. But this is what I think. You know, I think we need to be able to say that also. But also, that's the reflection. The self-awareness is the reflection. And in that way, you know, if 2 weeks down the line, somebody questions you about your actions, you actually know why you said what you did. And then, you know, and then you have no reason to feel guilty about it, to feel stupid about it, to think, well, I should have done that, because you gave the thing the appropriate thoughts in the moment. And sometimes I also feel like, you know, in that situation, I almost have to say, can I have 5 minutes to think about it? I'm not ready with the answer yet. I feel a few things, but I really feel this is important enough that I have a few more minutes. So can I have that? And sometimes, you know, the situation may not allow it. And then even in that situation, you can't feel guilty about it because you didn't have the answer when the answer was needed.
I like that, and just using that principle of actually stopping a conversation and saying, actually, I think too many people don't say, actually, I didn't understand that word, or I didn't understand what you said. Can you repeat that? Or actually, I can't answer you now. Give me some time. I'll come back. I think that's a really, really good advice.
Or also just saying, you know, right.
And not be embarrassed about it, not knowing.
Also saying, right now, I don't have enough information.
Yeah.
It's not that I'm confused or I don't know. I just don't have enough information. So can I have some time to get the information that I need?
Yeah.
So,
you know, you were talking about this showy-offy bit. I think the thing that I'm actually, by the way, I'm at Swarupa's house, so if she, so she'll probably be laughing when I say that. one of the things because I'm often the life and soul of a group and loud, and I feel the need to do that all the time sometimes because nobody else sort of like gets up and does something or says something, and there's like eerie silence, and I've stopped myself from doing that actually in the last few months because I was getting fed up of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be the ego thing, just saying actually stop it now.
It takes so much energy from me, and I want to enjoy as well. Just, take it in. Yeah. So, you all brought up very, very important aspects. And I think, this is such a fascinating area. Hence, what we've done is over the next couple of weeks, we're breaking it down. Next week, we're discussing the ego. Oh, not next week, sorry, 2 weeks from today, we're discussing the ego. And then 2 weeks after that, we discuss the persona.
Oh.
Right? Because we have this ego, good or bad, negative or positive. And then what Seema was saying, that persona, I am the life of the party. So that becomes, and it's becoming ever so confusing, right? Because you've just got to get onto any social media platform and they talk about personal brand. You've got to create your personal brand. All it's doing is forcing people to create these personas. Real or not, that's on social media. And how confusing is that going to become? Because you become that brand. But actually, we're not brands. We're people living and breathing with every moment being unique and special in its own right. And if you're going to try to be the same person in every moment, how much of life are we missing out on? And then what we have in the in-between weeks is we have our special guests. Next week, we have Ruth talking about her yoga journey, and which is interesting, Ruth, because you talked about things that you've learned, etc. And then we talk about the ego. And then we have Vishal sharing his experiences about the ego. Then we have the persona, and we have Seema talking about being the good person, being the life of the party. And then we go on. So this is what we're planning to do. We have a conversation where we all discuss, and then we have a dialogue between me and well, basically you're going to lead the dialogue. I'm just going to be sitting there and just having a discussion and asking questions that I think is interesting. But also because it will be live, everybody else gets to ask questions as well. I just thought it'd be good to have a group discussion and then one-to-ones, and it'll just help us explore and think for ourselves, learn from each other, but get down to the groups, because it's not easy understanding our personality, our persona, and being self-aware. It's not simple. It's not just, there's no algorithm for it. It's about figuring it out in every moment. But it's also what gives rise to our creativity. It's what makes us human. So I know I'm slightly over time today. Well, not slightly, 15 minutes, but you should know me by now. That's a norm. So shall we sign off? We've all got a lot to think about, and we'll take this up next week with Ruth, and then in 2 weeks with the entire group discussing the ego.
Great.
Okay, thanks for joining me, guys.
By the way, Anasha,
Thank you.
I think it's a great formula, this alternating that you've put together. Thank you.
Pleasure. I'm so excited about all of this and all the discussions. See you guys. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Natasha.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.